This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
We love sports.
Joe Louis, the greatest boxer ever lived.
Not only do we love sports, but we love to debate sports.
He was bad in Jack Clay. He bad in Sugar Ray. He bad in that. Who that's the new boy has? Mike Tyson look like a bulldog. He bad at him too. He done whipped Mike Tyson there. He whipped all their ass.
For the best sports analysis in the triad.
What about Rocky Marciano?
In-depth local coverage of your favorite schools and teams.
Let me tell you something once for all. Rocky Marciano was good. But compared to Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano ain't.
And of course, the best sports debate in the triad.
Beat Joe Louis's ass.
Welcome to Tobacco Road Sports Radio.
Joe Louis was 75 years old when he fought.
You're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Larry Frank from Frankly Speaking Sports, coming to you live from Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Are you a professional tattoo artist? If you are, I have good news for you. 13 Daggers Tattoo, located at the Fort Campbell Army Post in Clarksville, Tennessee, is now looking for professional tattoo artists. If you're a professional tattoo artist and you are looking for work, make sure to contact 13 Daggers Tattoo in Clarksville, Tennessee. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of College Football Monday. Hope everyone's doing well, and what a great football week we had, and what a great football week we're about to have. As I'm Larry Frank, joined again today by our co-host, one of the best. I call him the best every week. I call him the best college football analyst in the nation, Zach Mckinnell of the Blue Bloods. And Zach, I want to welcome you here on this Monday evening right now. And I want to start right out, Zach, because, we had some news that not necessarily indirectly, let's put it this way, was college football news. And that was the firing of Matt Rhule today by the Carolina Panthers, in the NFL. What does this do now? Obviously Matt Rhule was a great coach at Baylor University, made it to a bowl game. If anyone, which I'm sure there's someone, who do you see as the likely candidate to get Matt Rhule to be the next college head football coach?
It's going to be hard to predict because, there's probably at least 15 openings that haven't become open yet. But, right now, you're looking at, there's 5 openings right now between Arizona State, Colorado, Auburn, Georgia Tech, and Nebraska. I could see them going to or getting an interview for most of those. I think Georgia Tech is starting to. Georgia Tech and Auburn, ADs first, but both of them kind of have their top 3 candidates kind of already solidified for the most part. And maybe, he can separate himself in the interview process and jump into that top 3. But the one I'm looking at is really Nebraska. Is kind of in the region that he established success in at Baylor. But an interesting one would be Arizona State, because he came into Baylor around the time they were going through the turmoil off the field. And maybe Arizona State looks at him as someone who could offer a little bit of stability moving forward under, all the off the field issues that they're dealing with. So I would say Nebraska, Arizona State would be my picks of the jobs that are open now, but don't be surprised if, there's a job opening somewhere along the line later this season or in the postseason that Matt Rhule becomes a strong candidate. But we've seen a lot of coaches fail at the NFL level, come back down and have large amounts of success in college football. Matt Rhule might just be one of those guys. So I expect him to get an opportunity somewhere. The other question is he ready to jump right back into coaching? He got a lot of money in terms of a buyout. Does he, take a few years off to get his head straight, spend some time with his family? We'll see. But I think Matt Rhule is going to be linked to a lot of jobs moving forward.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I think Nebraska looks like
the most interesting job for him. But once again, that's based on what's available today. Like you said, we don't know. What do we have? We still have the whole month of October and November before college football is even over. But remember, it's going to not be long before these schools that do make decisions want to get somebody in place real quickly because of recruiting purposes. If you're a school like Nebraska, who definitely needs a big time name at their school right now, do you jump on board right now and offer Matt Rhule something to entice Matt Rhule to go there before somebody else maybe has a more enticing position for him? And this way they can start the recruiting process right away?
Potentially, but you don't want to make the impulsive hire. You want to make sure you go through the right process, interview the right people, and allow, if you hired a search committee, them to do their job. I don't think just because he became available and he might be able to step in sooner than some other candidates, I don't think you want to pass up a candidate that might be a better fit for you just for the short-term option of Matt Rhule stepping in, because the season, if you can get a hire in November, you still give the coach about a good few weeks to get a staff together, get a recruiting class together. And ultimately, even if you bring Matt Rhule in, he's probably going to want people on his staff that are employed elsewhere, and those guys can't step in. So I don't think you'd be getting the advantage that you think you would by bringing Matt Rhule in too soon.
Okay. Well, a topic that this week does have me a little bit on edge, let's put it that way, for better words, is the AP Top 25. Okay, I'm not worried about 1, 2, and 3 with the Georgia and the Alabama and the OSU and Clemson. I really don't care. I think they might have, or they're close to getting that pretty right. But I got a couple of questions for you that really, really surprised me in the top 25. First of all, I want to start out with this. Last week's poll, Cincinnati is number 24. They play University of South Florida and barely beat them, and they move down 3 spots. I mean, up 3 spots. They're still in the top 25. With that close of a game versus USF, wouldn't you think they'd fall out of the top 25?
No, I mean, some voters really and truly only watch a handful of games. So if you win and other teams lose in front of you, you just like by default move up. It's just that's the artifacts that you get in voting for voters who don't do their due diligence on how teams actually look. They see a W, they see another team had an L, and they move teams accordingly. And that's the artifacts you're going to get when that happens.
So you beat a team that you and I can probably go out and put a team together and compete with versus USF, the University of South Florida. You're 24th in the nation, and you move up 3 spots because of that win?
I mean, I don't think they. I just think it's because teams in front of them lost. You look at A&M dropped out. You looked at, I think there were a handful of other teams that dropped out, and they moved up by default. And I think that's what the voters were looking at. And I don't agree with it, but that's how a lot of voters operate.
One that I didn't agree with, but it's going to take care of itself this week, is North Carolina State ranked 15th. Syracuse is ranked 18th. I think Syracuse is a much better team, and I think this weekend when we go to our game previews, this is one of the games we're going to preview. I think Syracuse, the real winner, is going to obviously take care of itself this weekend since they play against each other.
I mean, I disagree. I mean, you look at NC State, the only loss they have is a close loss to Clemson on the road in a primetime game, in a game that they competed for 3.5 quarters. Clemson.
But I looked at last week's game versus FS Florida State, and they played sloppy. They played ugly.
But they still beat a top 25 Florida State team, though.
Florida State was out of the top 25.
Well, it's still a decent Florida State team, in my opinion. I still don't think that's a bad win. And right now, if Syracuse and Florida State played, I think that would be a close game. So I don't think NC State's overrated at 15. They lost to a good Clemson team, and they got a few good wins. I just don't think Syracuse has done anything to garner a top 15 ranking at this point. And you mentioned they have a chance this weekend. So
right.
I think NC State and Syracuse are in their correct spots as of right now. And we'll see this weekend, who's the better team. But I don't think you can punish NC State by dropping them, below 18th just because they lost a close game to Clemson.
All right, and then the other one is TCU. TCU, I've been on that bandwagon for a while now, and Oregon. Oregon, I think, is overrated. And I know you thought the same thing at one time this year. Now it's close. One's 13, one's 12. Is that right?
I mean, I don't think it at this point. I think you're just splitting hairs saying like, okay, well, because I mean, I think there's groups and everything. So I'm a voter for the FCS top 25. I think when you look at like groups of anywhere from 3 teams to 5 teams at certain points at the poll, it's almost like it's where like you can argue like, okay, so the top 3 right now in college football, Georgia, Ohio State, Bama, like however you want to rank them, like I'm cool with, like it'll work itself out in the end. Then you got like 4, 5, 6, and 7 in the poll, and Clemson, Michigan, Tennessee, USC. You can argue all you want, like where they go, it'll work itself out at the end. I just think splitting hairs from 12 to 13, I think it's such a minor difference that eventually we're going to find out Oregon's got some big games coming up. Same for TCU. I think both of these teams moving forward will be just fine. I mean, Oregon's lost to Georgia. Given it was a blowout loss, I don't know if TCU fares much better against Georgia.
Well, I'm glad you said that because it segues me right into the results from the week. It was only a week ago we sat here and somebody that I know very well that is sitting next to me said, there is no way, and you know what, that TCU will beat Kansas. I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas beats them by 50 points. And then you said, I'm only kidding, but I think it's going to be a blowout. What is it going to take for Zach Mckinnell to start believing in Max Duggan and this TCU team?
I mean, listen, Dugan played well, but let's just be honest. If Daniels doesn't go out of that game, I think it's different. But
that's football.
Oh, I know, I got you, but I still think Kansas lost by 7 with a backup quarterback who played really well. But man, yeah. Dugan's the guy. He had 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and man, Johnston at the wide receiver spot was an absolute stud.
14 receptions
for over 200 yards. I mean, he was all over the field for TCU. I thought they played a great game, man. The offense is explosive, and I thought Bean for Kansas,
he looked good coming in.
He did. I don't know. Listen, for Les Miles being at Kansas for as long as he was and not having a damn quarterback, they seem to have a lot of really good quarterbacks in Kansas all of a sudden. And so I'm looking at Les Miles a little bit sideways because Bean came in through for 262 and 4 touchdowns and just thrown into action. I think both of these teams are really good. I'm glad they didn't punish Kansas as much as I thought they would because it took a lot for Kansas to get ranked. So I thought, man, even with a backup quarterback loss, they were just going to tank because people just said it's Kansas. And so I'm glad they reflected that. I really would like to see, I don't know how you feel, Oklahoma State's going to be tough. Texas with Quinn Ewers looks legit because Quinn Ewers is that guy. But I would not be surprised or hate if Kansas and TCU got to have a rematch in the Big 12 championship because this was one hell of a game.
Yes, it was. Between
these two teams. And I think both of these teams are great. But man, listen.
This is a game that went back and forth, Zach. It wasn't like one team was blowing it out and this and that. This was one of those games you love watching because it's good football and each way it's going back and forth type football.
You got to give Sonny Dykes credit. I thought TCU was going to take a step back without Gary Patterson. They look extremely electric on the offensive side of the ball, and that goes back to Sonny Dykes' offensive mind. But, man, TCU looks legit. They're in the top 15. They should be, and that looming matchup between them and Oklahoma State is going to be one hell of a matchup between a really good Oklahoma State defense and a great TCU offense.
All right, let's go ahead over to the next game, which I don't think was a surprise to any of us. Tennessee, LSU. Hooker was great, but 2 things that I recognize out of this game. First of all, Jabari Small, an excellent game. Averaged 5.8 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns, $127 on the ground. But the other thing I liked about Tennessee that kind of excites me is their defense came to play. They only allowed 55 yards rushing to this LSU team. They sacked Daniels 5 times, had 2 turnovers. You got to really give a lot of credit. We're always giving credit to this powerful Tennessee offense, but you got to give some credit to the defense this week.
I think the line setters and the fans, they disrespected Tennessee this week. The fact that they were a 3-point favorite over what I consider not a very good LSU team was disrespectful.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you said it. They still it's for Tennessee. They're going to put 500 yards up every week in offense.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. The one thing I'm worried about is penalties. 12 penalties for over 100 yards is going to get you beat this
107
upcoming
yards.
weekend.
Yep.
They're going to get that will get you beat this upcoming weekend. But and you mentioned Hooker. I thought Hooker played his worst game of the season thus far. And they still
he wasn't the reason they won.
Yeah.
The other weeks it was the reason they won. This week, I won't say they didn't need him, but like you said, he didn't do anything that propelled them except, he ran, he was the lead guy as always as the quarterback, but it was other people getting more involved than they have in the previous weeks.
His deep ball is beautiful.
Yeah,
he throws the deep ball so perfect, and I mean he's working himself up into first round consideration at the NFL draft as well.
Well,
and
give credit to McCoy too, his receiver.
Oh yeah,
what a job
stud.
He's done stepping up since Tillman's been out.
I agree, and I mean, and Hyatt too. I think he had the 2 big touchdowns this weekend. But you mentioned it. If Tennessee's defense can give you this production, I think Young had 2.5 sacks. If they can get to the quarterback and force turnovers, Tennessee is going to be extremely hard to beat. And I think they're going to be able to compete with Alabama and Georgia coming up on their schedule. This team looks complete, and everyone made fun of Tennessee through the coaching hire, like the coach hiring process. They nailed it. They hit a home run coaching hire. Man, they have been great in the transfer portal. And I just want people to say,
but do you remember when this all happened, Zach? They were the laughing stocks. They had all these issues at Tennessee, and now they're hiring Josh Heupel, and everyone's like, he was probably the last guy. He might not have even been on the initial list of people when they wanted to do interviews, but nobody wanted to go to Tennessee.
Offensive genius, man. Because listen, I want people to go back and watch highlights of Hendon Hooker at Virginia Tech. I didn't see any of this. There was none of the Hendon Hooker was the reason sometimes Virginia Tech didn't play well because he couldn't throw the football. And now he's one of the most efficient passers in the country. Josh Heupel and this offensive staff deserves a bunch of credit for this development.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we're going to move on. How many weeks have I said the UCLA Bruins go as Zach Charbonneau goes? I call him Charbonneau. Since I've been pronouncing his name. What an unbelievable game he had. 198 yards, 1 touchdown. UCLA had 502 total yards on the ground. Thompson Robinson, another great game. This team, say what you want, but Utah was still a well-respected team, although this was a team, I will have to admit, that I thought was overrated. I think they lost to Florida earlier in the year. Thought they were a little overrated being at 11, but give UCLA credit for coming out and just having an incredible offense. Jake Bobo had 2 touchdown receptions, and this UCLA team continues to fly.
I'm impressed with UCLA. I keep doubting them, and they keep showing me up, and especially because there was a time in the second quarter where I had a little bit of doubt. I mean, UCLA was up 14-3, if I'm not mistaken. I think and man, I thought I was like, oh, man. But listen, Cam Rising played terrible. Tavion Thomas was not as efficient on the ground as I thought. I don't know where to place Utah moving forward, but listen, where do you put Dorian Thompson-Robinson moving forward in the Heisman race?
Well, he's not going to be up in the top 4. I don't think. I mean,
could he be?
You got to put Stroud. You got to put Young. There you go, right there.
Could he be? I'm not. I don't think he's at the top 3. But
okay, well,
right
where's
now,
Hooker? Let's put it there. Is Hooker up there?
I mean, Hooker's there. I think Thompson Robinson has comparable stats. I mean, right now in 2022, he's completing 75% of his passes, over 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. And on top of that, I think he has 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns as well. That's pretty good, man.
Well, I'm looking at some of these other guys. I mean, obviously Bryce Young. I mean, I tell you who I like, and you're going to laugh at me, but he won't be in the race. I like Dugan.
Oh,
Max
okay,
Dugan.
Dugan. I thought you were gonna say Corum again. I was like, I know you're high on Corum.
No, I like the guy that the quarterback from Fordham who's having the outstanding year.
Oh, Demorit.
Right, Demore. But I don't think the competition he's playing, very rarely do you see. It's got to be something just unbelievable. And this, although it's unbelievable what he's doing, it's not unbelievable enough to get him votes, I think.
UCLA is going to be tough to beat, though, when Robinson is going 18 for 23 for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then you got Charbonnet rushing for 200, averaging 9 yards per carry. That's going to be impossible
It's
to
crazy.
beat in the Pac-12. And right now you're looking, I think it might come down to the last week of the season, UCLA versus USC.
And you know another guy to throw in there, and you may laugh at me, and I know you're high on him, Will Rogers.
Oh, he's a stud. Oh, my goodness, he's a stud.
You got so many. We talk about this week after week, but then you can't have 8 people in a Heisman race. You know what I'm saying? Oh, can you? I don't know, but it's not going to, they got 4 finalists, I believe it is, that they narrow it down to. And not all 4 are going to be quarterbacks.
The thing I hate, though, and I know some voters are going to do this, they're going to say that Will Rogers is a system quarterback. They're going to say, man, Mike Leach quarterbacks always put up stats like this. And I think they're going to take away from, even though they shouldn't, because, I mean, right now, Will Rogers has thrown for 2,100 yards and 22 touchdowns. That is
how many interceptions?
ridiculous.
Nearly, what,
3.
3.
Right. And completing over 70% of his passes. I don't know if you remember, man. Back in the day in football, it was impressive if a quarterback hit like 65% of his passes. Nowadays, we have right now in college football, we have like 15 guys completing 70+% of their passes. Excuse me, like almost. I mean, that is insane.
Yes, and we're seeing it this year. It's incredible. But the one thing when we go back to UCLA, what you say is, I love the balance on this team. And you're starting to see Alabama get that balance with Jabari Smith now. And, we don't know when Young is going to be back. They haven't made it official yet if we'll be back or not back this week that I'm aware of. But it's going to be interesting to see how the injury bug affects some of these guys. Will it knock them out because of the amount of time they missed as well? So
that's what's going to hurt Young.
What's that?
That's what's going to hurt Young. I don't know. Yeah. Right now, I don't know if Young's in the Heisman race after missing last week.
And you know what? Alabama, which we'll get into in a minute, hasn't really played what you call stellar football. They're winning. They're doing what they got to do to win. But let's hold off on that. We'll get into that in a minute. But another game one that surprised me this week had to be Arizona State over Washington. I didn't see this coming. I mean, I don't know if you saw this coming, but I definitely didn't see this coming as I go to my notes up. This guy, Trenton Brugette, was 15 of 21, 3 touchdowns. He came in because Emory Jones got hurt for Arizona State. And then, but the one thing I noticed, there was so many times in this game, I got to see the highlights of it. Washington had what you and I would call defensive lapses. They just fell asleep, maybe. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, on defense. And Arizona State, 9 of 13 on third down conversions. And the end of the day, Washington got fooled and they got beat by Arizona State, of a team that's really, when you look at it, is in a lot of turmoil this year. And they come and they beat a team like Washington. It just surprised me.
I talked about it on my show that I just got done doing. Sometimes an interim head coach can spark a team. We saw it with Ed Orgeron multiple times, twice. We've seen it across the country. I think there's 3 or 4 interim head coaches right now in college football. They all have winning records or are undefeated except for one, and the one that's not has played 2 top 10 teams and won the other game they played. It's just they just keep getting sparked in just weird ways. And this is what happened with Arizona State. I think when people see a coach get fired, they might just get lulled into like, okay, man, they don't even have a coach. We should be able to win this game. But I mean, when you look, this is one of those games. I went back and watched, some of this game because the box score doesn't tell the story. Washington outgained them. Arizona State had more penalties. The time of possession was close. Like, I don't even know what happened, but I think Michael Penix's inability to get the ball in the end zone was obvious. They had 5 rushing touchdowns, but an interception through the air, no passing touchdowns for him. And Borgett played a hell of a game. And also, what was it? Valladay was the running back that had over 100 yards and a touchdown.
Yes.
They ran the ball very well. You got to give Arizona State credit. They're fighting for their interim head coach. And hey, maybe they can make a little bit of a run and possibly get to a bowl game if they can win enough games down the stretch.
Yeah. I said last week it was going to be close. I got laughed at. And the only reason I said that was because A&M, for some reason, always, I don't know what it is. Okay, I never said they were a better team than Alabama, but they always play Alabama close. But Alabama, I'm sorry, they're winning. I know it. They're undefeated, but they are not playing great football. They are definitely not. 4 turnovers, sacks 4 times, 5 of 14 on third down. And I know Young's not in, but that's not Alabama. They always usually have somebody, to put in there. 6 penalties on the day. Milroe, 12 of 19, 3 touchdowns, an interception. But, this is a game where Gibbs really showed up, 154 yards, 7.3 yards per carry. That really carried Alabama. But otherwise, a game that, just they didn't play good Nick Saban type football.
The penalties are the biggest thing, and that's not
Yes.
Nick Saban football. But I'm going to be honest, man. If I know the score says otherwise, but I think watching this game, man, without Milrose, I think you finally saw, even though he was explosive, let's be 150. He had 83 yards rushing, 111 through the air, had 3 touchdowns. His inexperience cost him 3 turnovers. Bryce Young doesn't miss the roaming safety over the top and throws that pick. And Bryce Young isn't running around the pocket scrambling with the ball in one hand. I hate that. Quarterbacks, if you're going to run around the pocket, put 2 hands on the football. Please put 2 hands on the football, because he got stripped twice in situations where I think Bryce Young would either just taken the sack or got rid of the football. Without those 3 turnovers, because the other one was on someone else, without those 3 freshman turnovers by Milroe, I don't think this game's even close. And so I do think Bama is a better team. I love Gibbs. I don't know how you feel.
We've been talking about him week after week here.
He's an NFL running back.
Yeah, no doubt. There's no doubt about it. And, the one thing, but I want to mention, and I don't want it to go unnoticed, and I'm not knocking Bryce Young, but even with Bryce Young in there, they haven't looked that great. Not like the team we saw last year. Don't get me wrong. We know Bryce Young, and we know what he brings to the table, but they've still been making a lot of 10 penalties in games where Bryce Young was playing, just not being crisp as they were in years past.
Yeah, I agree. This Bama team has some flaws. It's still just, and I agree with Wayne here. This is the first time I thought Milroe looked like a freshman, because he looked legit against Arkansas, and he still looks great. He's super athletic, but he made 3 big freshman mistakes that I think kept A&M in this game. If Young plays this game, even with them not looking great, I think Bama wins this one by 2-3 touchdowns easily.
Yep, and it doesn't get any easier this week, which we'll talk about a little later. Let's go ahead and see if we can get Rodney on the phone. I'm going to pull some stuff up here for a minute. See if there we go. Let's see how nope, we don't want that. No, I don't want that. I'm trying to get him. Let's see. Oh, that's a nice one. We got that one. All right, we'll try to go with this one. How's that? Let's see. All right. Let's give him a call. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear him or not, Zach, but I'm going to do my best this way, okay?
All right.
Okay, so we got this one. And then if I go to this one, that's just him talking. We could do. And I'm just trying a couple different things. What is this one? All right. That's different. All right. Are you there? Yep, you're moving. I see you. All right, let's go ahead and give him a quick call and see if we can get him on the line, see how loud he comes out. Let me find his phone number here. Originally, he had to drive somewhere, so originally he was going to be on per link, but we'll do it this way.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, Rodney.
Hey.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure, honor to introduce to you now the founder of TiderInsider.com and the host of the award-winning Tider Insider TV, now entering, listen to this, 23rd year on WVUA 23 in Tuscaloosa. Let's welcome in Rodney Orr. Rodney, how you doing tonight, buddy?
Hey, I am doing great. I appreciate you having me.
Rodney, thank you so very, very much for joining us. I know you got a busy schedule, the success of Alabama and all that's going on right now. But let me ask you to start right out. I'm not going to pull any punches. In your opinion, with the healthy Bryce Young, is Alabama still the team to beat?
Well, look, they're certainly one of the teams to beat, I think, with a healthy Bryce Young. But to be very honest with you, this team has not been as disciplined as I expected. I thought there was a lot of maturity coming back, leadership, that they had learned a lot of things from last season where they fell short in the national championship game. I thought they would play with a lot more maturity than they played in some of the games this year. We've seen it at times, but then we've seen that the lack of discipline, they beat themselves in some ways. Again, when I say beat themselves, making mistakes, undisciplined errors, these types of things. And look, if they don't get those things cleaned up, they're going to have a tough time accomplishing their goal, which is to win the national championship, obviously.
Yeah, and Zach, my co-host Zach Mckinnell and I, we were talking about this before you came on, but this is probably the first time in a long time where, despite the 6-0 record that they have, this has been probably one of the more undisciplined teams when it comes to the penalty bug hitting this team. How, Nick Saban, the guy, the disciplinary, everything we hear about, how do they go about correcting these penalties that, it's sometimes hitting double digits in certain games?
Well, yeah, there's been some. It's been strange. For example, Henry Toa, the senior inside backer, Mike linebacker guy, it's a real leader on this team. In the Arkansas game, you probably saw that late hit, uncharacteristic play for him. Those types of things. They've made these kind of mistakes. In this past game, J.C. Latham, the starting right tackle, on one of the touchdown throws from Jalen Milroe, he gets hit with a personal foul because he stands over and kind of taunts the opposing defensive lineman. These are the kind of things. And to be honest with you, sometimes you have kids that make these kinds of mistakes. It's just kind of their character, to be honest with you. But these are good kids. These are kids. That's what's so difficult, because when I look at this group of Alabama players, we're not talking about a bunch of guys that are difficult. They're not bad characters. They've got some really good individuals on this team. So it's kind of hard to explain some of that. Then they've had some face mask penalties. They've had just, you name it, things have cropped up. And some of it's been just bad luck, things that have happened. So, how are they going to get it straightened out? I don't know. But I know one thing. I've seen teams like this before, and I've thought, there's no way this team can go to the national championship game, much less win the thing. And lo and behold, over the course of the season, this is what makes Nick Saban great. He is probably the best developer of a team I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, I don't think there's any. We've seen that year after year after year. Let me ask you this, because one of the main concerns for this team continuing its success, what is the latest we're hearing on the status of Bryce Young?
Well, that's a great question. I still, would say if you press me to put a phrase on it, I would say day to day. I will be mildly surprised if Bryce doesn't play in this game. I think he will. Frankly, there's talk here that he probably could have played in this last game but it was kind of a precautionary move to hold him out. And I think Bryce wanted to go in the game. I think late in the game he wanted to go in the game. I don't think Nick Saban would have allowed that under the circumstances, but I will be a little surprised if Bryce doesn't play. I think he really wants to play. I think he'll be probably medically cleared to play. But again, I don't think we'll know for sure, maybe until game time.
Yeah, and, if it's Nick Saban's choice, he's going to wait to the last minute anyway, because that's what Nick Saban does. But what is your thought or your assessment of the fill-in quarterback, Jalen Milroe, and how he's done in the last, 1.5, 2 games?
Well, let's be fair to him, and I'll say this. I mean, he came in as a really raw athlete, great athlete. When I tell you it's coming out of that football complex, they think he's a Lamar Jackson type athlete, okay? But he was really raw in high school coming out of Katy, Texas. He didn't play in one of these sophisticated high school passing offenses. They just kind of relied on his athletic ability. So they're kind of trying to develop him as a passer to become more comfortable in the pocket. And I'll say this. The kid has really worked extremely hard to try to do that, to try to train himself to stay in the pocket and to learn. He wants to become an NFL quarterback. So all of those things, I give him credit for doing that. And given the circumstances, I thought he played tremendous at Arkansas. He really did. He made perhaps the play of the year with that 77-yard run that kind of got Alabama going there in the fourth quarter. This game, I think, to be honest with you, if he had cleaned up those turnovers, he doesn't fumble the ball twice, give the A&M the ball inside, Alabama territory, he actually has a pretty decent game. He goes, 12 of 19 for only 111 yards, but he has 3 touchdown passes. So that's really positive things. He had 86 yards rushing or 83 yards rushing. So I think those are really positive things. I just think it's the mistakes that he made in the game. And Nick Saban said today he just played with so much anxiety that it really limited himself basically. So I think it's just a developmental process for him. And, I think eventually, I think he's got a lot of talent, obviously.
Yeah, we're talking to Rodney Orr, founder of TighterInsider.com and the host of the award-winning Tighter Insider TV show, now on 23 years on WVUA 23 in Tuscaloosa. Let me ask you this before I let Zach jump in here. You couldn't have asked, Bryce Young going down. You got a backup quarterback coming in, has some anxiety, like you said. You couldn't really ask for a better time for Jahmyr Gibbs to really start getting going the last couple of games. I know last game, 154 yards, 7.3 yards per carry. This man, this isn't a legitimate NFL-style running back, isn't it?
Yeah, he's really, really good. Jahmyr Gibbs, the transfer from Georgia Tech. And, I said before the season and leading up to the season that I really felt like Jahmyr Gibbs would give Alabama as a running back kind of what Jamison Williams gave them last year as a receiver. Meaning I thought he was going to be a guy that could be a difference maker. He could provide explosive plays, whether it's as a running back, running the ball, obviously, catching the ball out of the backfield. I think he's going to make some big plays as a receiver still yet. And I think, too, as a kick returner. So I really thought he was going to be able to provide that kind of, explosiveness that he's shown, especially the last 2 games when he went for over 200 against Arkansas. And then, as you mentioned, 154 in this last game. And the thing about him is if you give him a crease, that's really all he needs. Because when he hits that crease, he's got such acceleration that he can get past the second level very, very, very quickly. So he's been a very dynamic playmaker, very important player for Alabama.
Zach, go ahead and jump in here, buddy.
How you doing, Rodney?
I'm doing well, Zach. How are you?
Not too bad. So one of the criticism last year was the offensive line not always playing up to par. There were some times in the Iron Bowl last year and down the stretch in the playoffs that the one side of the offensive line wasn't playing very well. What's been your take and your overall grade on the offensive line development throughout 2022?
Well, first of all, Coach Saban said today that he didn't think the offensive line had one of its best games against Texas A&M, and He said, you kind of got to weigh the positive plays versus the negative plays. And then he explained that a negative play to him is anything that's not more than 3 yards. So kind of high standards there with the evaluation. But I think, to me, this offensive line is one of the stories of this team. It's a very positive story, the development of that offensive line, because if you looked at that Texas A&M game, Texas A&M knew what Alabama was going to do. I mean, they really were limited throwing the ball. They realized that, they could stack the box, and that's what they did. And Alabama still rushed for actually 326 yards, and now net 288 with the sacks taken out. But I mean, Alabama ran the ball really well. A lot of that was Gibbs, hitting those creases. But I think this offensive line's really come along. You're right. It was, to be honest with you, it was so makeshift last year. How they got as far as they did, and beat Georgia, dominated Georgia in the SEC championship game, to be honest with you. And again, give Georgia credit. They got that rematch. They won the national championship. They deserved it. But, I mean, if Alabama doesn't lose those two receivers, Bryce probably carves them up pretty good again. But the question was the offensive line. And, this year I just think right now it's very encouraging so far to see the progress they've made. And let me give kudos to Eric Wolford, the new offensive line coach, because I think he's done a really, really good job of kind of developing this group.
Absolutely. And I mean, a top 6 matchup this weekend on the road, on both sides. Give me one matchup that you see in Tennessee that you think Alabama can exploit. And on the flip side, what's one matchup that Tennessee can exploit that kind of worries you as you've been covering this Alabama team?
Well, I would say, for Alabama, and let's just say Bryce is going to be Bryce. I just think that the opportunity to find some holes in that secondary of Tennessee's, they're giving up over 300 yards a game, through the air. And I think the mixture of the ability to throw the ball, the receivers that are developing here now with Bryce, and then also the run game, the real balance that they have. You look what Florida did to them. Anthony Richardson had 453 on them, career day. They had a pretty good running game against Tennessee, 141, I think it was. So I think those are some things Alabama can exploit the defense, I think, as a whole. On the flip side of that, I really think, with Tennessee, the way they've got that up-tempo offense, they really can strike big plays. Last year's game, for example, they hit 3 big plays on Alabama, 3 big pass plays. Other than that, they really didn't do a whole lot offensively. It's kind of surprising. I think there was like a streak there of 6 or 7 straight series that Tennessee went 3 and out against the Alabama defense. So it was the big plays. It was the big pass plays, busted coverages, confusion in the Alabama secondary, because this offense goes so fast. And if they get you off balance, they can strike with big plays. But I think here's the key for Alabama. You got to stop the run game. You got to stop Jabari Small. Yep. And you cannot let the quarterback hurt you on the ground, because he's really, really dangerous. If you get pressure on him, you better get him down. And then I think it's that, and I think it's the deep shots. I think that's the things. If Alabama can stop the run and not give up deep shots, they're in a pretty good position.
And it's been a running joke, I know, because I'm an Auburn grad, so I kind of keep my finger on everything. It's been a running joke with Alabama fans about the streak right now with the wins over Tennessee, and this is really the first time in a long time that Tennessee's been this good. What's been the narrative around Tuscaloosa going into this game? Are Bama fans looking at this one a little bit different, or do you feel like there's a quiet confidence around Tuscaloosa that Bama is going to be able to continue that streak?
Listen, I think the way the thought process is that Tennessee's a really good team. I mean, they're top 6 right now. What can you say? I mean, they looked really good against LSU. Even though they had a tight game with Florida kind of made that tight at the end. And all you can really say is that they're one of the most explosive offenses in the country. They're undefeated. Mm-hmm. You're playing at their place. They're going to be rabid. This is going to be a zoo up there. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be crazy. The question is can Tennessee kind of harness the emotion of all this? Because sometimes you get in a situation like this and you almost get overwhelmed with emotion. And, it's like Nick Saban says, I'll tell you guys this. He's the best there is at managing all the external stuff. And what I mean by that is, for example, everybody's talking about this streak. Nick Saban will tell them it doesn't matter what happened 10 years ago, 10 days ago. This doesn't matter. It's what's going to happen is what's going to matter the most is who blocks, tackles, who executes the best. And I guarantee you that's really what his focus is on this game. So the streak and all that stuff, it's not really something that, they talk about.
And Rodney, this is a game where when you really look at this game, you got two explosive offenses, no doubt about that, playmakers on both sides of the ball. But you mentioned something earlier, and even when Bryce Young was playing, before he just got hurt, it seemed even on the offensive side of the football that at times, even with Bryce there, it was hit and miss. And then when he was, getting things done right, like you mentioned, stupid, bonehead mistakes or penalties that are not customary of a Nick Saban team. This is going to need to be, and I think you'll agree with me, a heck of a lot more crisper of a game for Alabama, especially going on the road into Neyland, that they can't afford to make these type of mistakes when they're facing a quarterback and Hooker, as aggressive as he is, a dual-type quarterback. He's a quarterback that doesn't turn over the ball a lot.
Right. No, he doesn't have an interception this year.
Nope.
And you're 100% right. I mean, they've executed better this year. They've been clean. They've been very impressive, and Alabama frankly hasn't. And that's the real thing right here. When I say Tennessee has a real chance in this game, do I think Alabama's a more talented team? Yes, I do. Do I think they're probably a better team in terms of, if they play 10 times or whatever that might be, the best talent wins? Yeah. But that's really not what it is. I mean, this is a team, Tennessee, that even though they've got some issues in the secondary and overall defensively, they give up some stuff. They're only giving up 17 points a game.
Yeah.
So they're keeping people out of the end zone. So that's a key. But here's what I would say is, I think you just hit the nail on the head. If I'm Alabama, and my biggest concern is, how are we going to execute? Are we ever going to get out of our own way? And I mean, because if this team gets out of their own way, then nobody's going to beat them.
Right.
But I'm not sure they can get out of their own way. I'm really not. And that's the key. I mean, it's like you said, hit and miss offensively. I mean, you got receivers. You go through games and you say, okay, you're starting to see the rhythm develop. A few weeks ago against Vanderbilt, right before the Arkansas game, you could see that rhythm developing. You could see Ja'Cory Brooks coming around, Trayshawn Holden, Isaiah Bond, the young freshman, Kobe Prentice, Jermaine Burton, getting in the mix a little bit more. But then all of a sudden, you got guys dropping balls. Ja'Cory Brooks dropped a couple of in the Arkansas game. There's been some others guys that have had some drops. Cameron Latu, the tight end, has been inconsistent. Mm-hmm. So you follow what I'm saying? It's the inconsistency that you're talking about. And can a team turn that around in midseason? I mean, I really don't know. We'll see.
And it's not just one guy. It seems like the bug is hitting everyone.
Everybody, yeah. It's amazing. It really is. And it's frustrating. The Alabama fans are frustrated by it. I mean, here you are, like you said, you're, number one in one poll, number three in the other, and all of these things. You've got a great team, but it has been hit and miss. And that's something that we really felt like this team was going to kind of be more in sync, because they were hit and miss last year. A lot of that was on the offensive line. They had some injuries, obviously, at receiver, and at running back. So right now, I would say the most encouraging thing to me about this Alabama offense is they are developing a really good running game. The offensive line seems to be at times taking over the line of scrimmage, so you can rely on that, I think. And then, let's see if Bryce can get hopefully healthy and then kind of get some of these receivers to step up on a consistent basis.
Zach, do you got any other questions for Rodney before we go? Rodney, I guess the only question we have left, because Zach is done and I'm pretty much done, is how do you see this one playing out?
Well, I haven't really thought. Our TV show tomorrow, I have to make my prediction. We've been doing that for 23 years. And I'll tell you what, I got a really good record, and it's all because of Nick Saban. But but listen, the thing that really kind of in this game that really kind of sticks out to me, and it's the point you made, and that's just the execution that Tennessee's had this year. Yeah. And how is this? But will this Alabama defense? Now, this Alabama defense played pretty well. Okay, so they're one of the top defenses in the country. Now, if they get there and they dominate the line of scrimmage and they stop the run and they don't give up big plays, then it may not matter if the offense misses here and misses there. I mean, because if they can hold Tennessee to 24, maybe even 27 points or whatever, then all of a sudden, I think Alabama can manage that offensively. I think that that Tennessee may have a tough time holding Alabama down, but if Alabama cannot gift wrap this game to them, I can just tell you that. They can't give them 4 turnovers like they did Texas A&M and expect to win.
All right, my friend. Well, listen, Rodney, we're going to find out soon enough here. We want to thank both of us. Want to thank you so very, very much taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on our College Football Tuesday show.
Guys, I greatly appreciate it. Y'all take care. Good luck.
All right, buddy. Be safe.
You too. Take care.
All righty. That was Rodney Orr, founder of the TigerInsider.com. Zach, before we go into next week's game, as I pull a couple of these, stay with me a minute while I pull these things down here. All right. There we go. Were you and I back? There we go, buddy. Before we go into next week's game, because we just talked about Alabama and Texas A&M, we talked briefly about NC State. The one surprise to me last week, and I'll tell you what, I don't know what this team is doing because they play so bad some weeks and they play so darn good. What do you make of Notre Dame? Michael Mayer, 11 receptions. They beat BYU.
I don't know where to place them. I mean, I think we're finally seeing that, one, BYU possibly was extremely overrated coming into the season. And then two, Marcus Freeman's slowly turning this thing around. And all those people that counted him out earlier are starting to get looked at a little bit sideways. I told people, man, give Marcus Freeman some time. It's going to be okay. Notre Dame is slowly coming around. As long as they can get to bowl eligibility, get to a bowl game, possibly win, with that recruiting class they have coming in, Notre Dame's going to be just fine.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I'm surprised. I've never been a huge Notre Dame fan, but I got to give credit where credit's due. The last couple of weeks, they've really started to get that portfolio and show, the image of their coach and their play on the field. And it's something that Notre Dame fans should be really, really excited about in the upcoming years while he's there. Well, let's go ahead and talk about next week. We're going to skip the break. I got 6 games here. Let's start off with this one. The one, there's some good ones. Penn State, 5-0 at Michigan, 6-0. J.J. McCarthy for Michigan has to have a similar game that he had last week versus, who was it? Was it Indiana they played last week?
Indiana.
We talk, I don't think this is a game where Michigan can totally rely on Blake Corum to do it all. There's going to have to be balance. You got to remember, Penn State has a great Russian defense. What happens, if they're able to contain Corum? I mean, what else can they do? Then you got Sean Clifford on the other side, who has Washington and Tinsley, 2 great receivers. I mean, how do you see this game going? Is this? And I didn't put what Michigan was ranked. They're ranked number 5. I'm sorry, guys. And Penn State's ranked number 10. How do you see this one playing out?
I like Michigan in this one. As of right now, I think Michigan right now is the more balanced team, and I do trust McCarthy a little bit more than I do Sean Clifford, especially in big games. Now, this really and truly could be one of the better running back battles of the weekend between Nick Singleton and Blake Corum. Both of these guys have been electric. I just think Michigan's defense is a little bit more complete. And also, Michigan's played 2 tough road games against Indiana and Iowa back-to-back and looked pretty good in both. And Penn State, 2 weeks ago against Northwestern, did not look the greatest. They really struggled to score against that Northwestern defense, and I think Michigan is a little bit better in that aspect. I think Michigan wins a close one, especially going back to the big house. Give me Michigan by a score this weekend.
All right. I do agree with you on that. Another game, and I don't think, and I'll tell you why. I think Syracuse can surprise a lot of people this way. For one reason, I don't think Devin Leary's playing. I think it's going to be Chambers being the quarterback for NC State because of, I believe it was a shoulder injury, if I'm correct, to Leary last week. But I'll tell you what, I like this kid. What's his name? Garrett Schrader of Syracuse, the quarterback. What a great young guy this is. And Sean Tucker, who last week had 232 yards, 3 touchdowns. Now, it wasn't against anyone, but it still counts from statistically. Number 15, NC State on the road at Syracuse.
If you kind of broke that news. If Leary's out, I'm going with Syracuse.
Right. I don't think there's a question if he's out.
Yeah. Give me Syracuse. I like Garrett Schrader at quarterback. Tucker's been great at the running back. Syracuse is the favorite now that Leary has been announced out, by the way. Syracuse is a 3.5-point favorite. I think they clear that. Their defense has been surprising this year, man. Their defense has only given up like 271 a game. And that's not like Syracuse. And so I'm taking Syracuse this weekend, especially with Leary being out with injury.
And, we talk about Schrader, 10 touchdown passes, 1 interception this year, but he also has 5 rushing touchdowns to go along with that. So he's one of those type KJ Jefferson, Hendon Hooker type quarterbacks that, you got to be able to stop both ways.
Yeah, I just think Syracuse has a really great balance on their team, something that they haven't had in a very, very long time. Give me Syracuse this weekend. And we're talking about, man, if Kansas can beat Oklahoma this week, Syracuse and Kansas are probably going to be top 15 teams sitting at 6-0 and what, 5-1 or 6-1? That's insane.
If I would have bet you that, you would have lost a lot of money.
That's a fact. I would have said, listen, you can have my 401k.
Well, buddy, here's a game. We just talked about it with Rodney, but we didn't really we talked about this Tennessee team. We talked about this Alabama team. We know Alabama has to play a crisp game. They can't afford some of the mistakes they made versus maybe some weaker opponents, but I am not counting Tennessee. You said A&M would not win last week. You were right. They didn't win. But are you going to say without a doubt that Tennessee cannot beat Alabama at their home field?
Tennessee is in a whole other stratosphere compared to A&M.
Right, but I'm just using an example.
Yeah, so I think Tennessee has a great shot. I think Bama's a 7.5-point favorite. I think this game's going to come down to one. I want to see the health of Bryce Young because, yes, it could have been last week. He was held up precautionary. You never know. Once you have an injury, especially shoulder, is he a little bit more hesitant to follow his instincts because sometimes just his playmaking ability can be special. And also, does Tennessee's offensive line hold up against a very talented front seven against Alabama? We have not seen Hendon Hooker yet really have a lot of pressure in his face. That's a big one, man. Shout out to my guy Wayne. I know he's a big supporter of the show. Mm-hmm. And I'm going with Alabama in a close one here. I know I'm expecting an electric environment in Knoxville, by the way. I cannot wait to see game day and see that game. I know it is going to be packed to the rim, and it's going to be I think this is going to be the best game day atmosphere we've seen all season. Give me Bama by 7, though. I think it's a close game. I think Tennessee, gets underneath the spread, but I just trust Alabama's defense to make 1 or 2 plays to win this game.
All right, buddy. Last week I won with this pick. Let's see how you are going to react this week. Oklahoma 5-0 at number 13. TCU 5-0.
Oklahoma State.
Oh, is it Oklahoma State?
Yeah.
Yeah, why did I put Oklahoma? I'm sorry.
Yeah, because Oklahoma, got beat 49-0 last week by Texas. They got destroyed, but man, this is a tough game to predict because I thought Oklahoma State's defense has really taken a step back, losing their defensive coordinator to Ohio State. I know what? I'm riding with you this weekend, man. I got TCU winning this one. And TCU's the favorite, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. TCU's a 3.5 point. But they won last week,
too, versus Kansas, weren't they?
Yeah, I think so. But I'm going with TCU this week. I trust Dugan. And this Oklahoma State defense, which was top in the country last year coming in, is giving up almost 25 points per game and over 400 yards. per game on the defense side of the football. I expect Dugan, Miller, that offense to have a big game. Give me TCU in a close one over Oklahoma State.
I like that. I like it. Here's a game I don't know why I have up here because I don't think there's any question that Mississippi State wins, whether Levis is back or whether he's not back because he's injured too. So you got all these guys. Kentucky played without him last week, lost. But I think Mississippi State is one of those teams that is just starting to get playing well. And I'm not going to say they're a top 4 team, but I think they're better than Kentucky.
They're a 7-point favorite. Give me 3 times that. Mississippi State by 20 plus. It's not going to be close.
Yeah, especially if, let me see if my notes.
Levis, I believe Levis is out if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's what I was just checking. I'm switching it around. Yeah, here it is.
Because they lost by 10 to South Carolina last week, and South Carolina is atrocious.
And I think Will Rogers is just going to light them up anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. All right, buddy. A game that I thought might be closer than it was, but Utah seems to be falling off a little bit. This Trojans team is unbelievable, man. I mean, we don't hear, for some reason on the East Coast, we don't hear as much about them as Alabama and all these other teams. But this is a good USC team.
Utah's the favorite. Did you know that?
That's crazy.
They're a 3.5-point favorite.
How? I mean, I'm asking you.
I mean, Utah's coming off a 10-point loss to UCLA on the road and is a favorite over number 6 USC.
And can you imagine? You bet on USC, it's considered the underdog. You're going to win money.
After we get off this show, I'm calling my previous co-host Brandon in Louisiana. I'm putting a bag on USC this weekend. Give me USC. Utah's defense did not play well last week. I think Caleb Williams is more explosive than even Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Give me USC in a big, I guess, upset win over Utah.
I don't even think – I think they win by more than 14 versus Utah.
It could be. I can't believe they're an underdog. That's insane to me.
All right, buddy, let's wrap it up here. I know Florida State losing some tough games. Clemson is playing well. I mean, they really are. Is this one of those games that Clemson is going to rout, or is it a closer game than it appears to be?
I don't know. I think Clemson's defense is the reason this one isn't very close. Florida State's on a 2-game losing skid. They lose 2 competitive games. Let me say that to Wake Forest and NC State. Clemson's better than both of those teams. Yes. I trust DJ this year. Will Shipley is the X factor. And man, the Clemson defense has not taken a large step back without Venables. Give me Clemson in a close win on the road. I do think Florida State keeps it competitive, though. I don't see that one being a blowout.
All right. I ask you this every week. And first of all, I ask you, any other games out there? Maybe one that I didn't mention that is intriguing.
Yeah, you missed the game of the week, man.
Which
number 1 versus number 2?
Who?
Number 1 versus number 2. South Dakota State, North Dakota State this weekend.
Oh, FCS.
Yeah.
I forgot FCS. You're right.
So the number 1 team in the country, North Dakota State, facing number 2, South Dakota State. And I believe it's the biggest, one of the biggest rivalries, 2:30 p.m. Central Time, ESPN Plus. This is a big one, man. The North Dakota State really struggled last week with a very, very bad Indiana State team. South Dakota State blows the doors off of South Dakota, held that team to 6 first downs and less than 150 yards of total offense. South Dakota State's rolling. Do not be surprised if the Jackrabbits win 4 straight over the Bison this weekend and take over that number 1 spot in the FCS.
Yeah, can't believe I forgot to write that one down. Yeah, see, you got to keep me on my toes sometimes. I do forget sometimes.
Hey,
go ahead.
Oh, it's a great game, and also, I think I know you're really high on DeMorit. If you're looking for another quarterback to really buy into, tune into an Incarnate Word game, man. Lindsey Scott has been going insane. He's a Nicholls State transfer, and they go and play Nicholls State this weekend in a big matchup with Incarnate Word in the Southland. Last week, man, in the first half, in 2 quarters of playing, he threw for 400 yards and 7 touchdowns in 2 quarters. And this is a guy who, listen, his stats last year, he had 16 touchdowns, 11 interceptions for 2,000 yards last year in Nicholls in like 13 games. This year for Incarnate Word, 2,100 yards, 27 touchdowns, 2 picks, completing 75% of his passes.
That's crazy.
And that's taken over for Cameron Ward.
Yes,
So no pressure, right?
No pressure at all.
And with a first-year head coach who has never been a head coach before.
It's amazing. That's why we love this game so much. You know, I ask you this also every week. Which team in the top 25 has the most to lose from a ranking standpoint, and which one has the most to gain?
I think let me pull back up the top 25. I got to really think about this one. I think
Bigger
Kansas
win for Tennessee than it is for an Alabama loss.
I don't think either team's going to really be hurt either way, especially if it's a close game.
If it's a close game, right?
Yeah, if it's a close game. If it's a blowout, then they both have a lot to lose. But I'm gonna say Kansas, because if Kansas loses to Oklahoma, it's a wrap. Kiss the top 25 goodbye for the rest of the season. You have no shot anymore.
You're so high on those guys too.
But I know Oklahoma hasn't looked good. But talk about just a defining win if Kansas beats Oklahoma convincingly on the road. Talk about just in terms of brand is huge. And I also want to give a shout out James Madison in the top 25. We didn't mention them earlier.
Number 25.
They come up from FCS, undefeated, win over App State, and they're probably right now the best team in the Sun Belt. And the worst part is they're not even eligible for postseason because of their what's it called, the move up rules, where they got to have like a waiting period before they can win the conference. Like James Madison at 25, a year after they came up from the FCS, and this is crazy, Larry, they probably, if they were still in the FCS, wouldn't be the best team in the FCS. Insane.
It's amazing. I tell you what, there's a lot of good football, and I know a lot of people concentrate on FBS, AP top 25, but you go to that FCS, you mentioned the Dakotas, who I've given people fits, for the last couple of years, even when they play a Power 5 school, they competitor. I think they beat Penn State a couple of years ago. I remember they had
Iowa
one
State.
of the Dakotas, but I can't remember. It was like 6-7 years. But nevertheless, there's good football out there to be watched. Don't just think. Last question somebody wanted me to ask you. I don't think it's a big deal, but we'll close with this. What do you think of the deal with Deion Sanders? And
it's just football, man. Come on.
Right, and that's what I say. But is Deion getting a little too big for his own head?
No, I mean, listen, you got the right to trash talk, and he said he was going to go in there and they were going to win, and they did. And, I feel like people look at it in such a binomial way where it's like either right or wrong, or like there's only two choices. Like, man, there's some gray area. Like Deion has the right to say whatever he wants to talk trash because he keeps winning. Beat him and then you can shut him up. But until someone beats him, he has all the right to talk. And then two, the other coach can feel some type of way. And he has every right to express that. It's just, man, it's just football. Like, when did we start being like, do you know how, man, you've been watching football for longer than me because you're a little bit older than me. How many times have we seen this? We have seen coaches at midfield not want to shake hands, not hug, and go back and forth in press conferences, and everyone's just all bent out of shape because I get it, because it's prime time. But man, at the end of the day, it's football, and everyone was appalled that there was cussing and a little push here, and like, everyone was upset. And it's like, man, that's football. Like, I don't know if you've been to a little league or a high school game. There's worse stuff that happens in those games. Like,
oh my gosh, yes, there is.
Come on, man. It's just, I think people.
Well, it wasn't Deion. It was the other coach that. Deion actually went to hug Grambling. What was it, Grambling State?
No, Alabama State.
Alabama State.
I was there. Like, I saw it coming from a mile away. The dude locked eyes with him and like went to shake his hand. And when he went for the hug, he just put a forearm up, and that's cool. Like, I just think people blew it way too out of proportion. I've talked about it on my show right before this, and I was like, did we forget it's football and I don't have to like you? And we're in between the white lines. Well, we're competitors.
You tend, when you see a call like they made on Tom Brady yesterday, you tend to forget it's football. So,
that's horrible. There was one tonight. Wait till you get off, because I was looking. I got a Twitter notification. There was one that was worse than that tonight.
How could it be worse?
Oh, it was bad.
Oh, I gotta watch it afterwards then, because I can't see how it could be any worse of a call.
Yeah, man, it's just getting so soft nowadays, man. Like,
yeah, it is.
Like, You got to put pillows underneath quarterbacks now just to get a sack.
You actually got to put them in a box, and you're not allowed to inside the box or something. I mean, you get electrocuted or something. It's crazy. But anyway, buddy, another week in the books. We got a great week. There's opportunities for a lot of upsets, just like every week, and we'll be here next week, same time, same place, to talk about it all.
Yep, man.
On behalf of myself, Zach Mckinnell of the Blue Bloods, thank you very much for tuning in this evening. Until next week, have a great week. And don't forget, what time is the Tennessee-Alabama game?
2:30.
Which I don't understand. But anyway, that's for another time, another place. At 2:30 in the afternoon, when everybody's out, instead of 8 p.m., I don't want to talk about it. But anyway, we'll see you next week, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Central, and 6 Pacific. On behalf of all of us here, have a great night. We'll see you next week.